Welcome back. For our last module of the Diet Wars, we're going to be talking about fasting and all the different variations. We're going to first start with talking about the history of fasting and circadian rhythms. Then we'll look into the variations of fasting, such as intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, and fasting mimicking diet. Then we'll look at the health benefits and potential risks, and end, as always, with our practical takeaways. So let's start with the history. Historically, humans naturally fasted intermittently due to food availability. We also abided to the natural circadian rhythms because we had no electricity. We were forced to go to bed when it was dark and rise with daybreak so that we could work during the day, usually out in the fields. Currently, humans have a widely available access to high-calorie processed foods, plus we're more sedentary. So what's the result? We're more obese and we're more sick. Plus, we also abuse our natural circadian rhythms because we can. We have electricity, we have devices, we have computers, we have TVs, we have lots of different modalities that will keep us awake at all hours. Plus, our work sometimes causes us to work against our natural circadian rhythm. So what is the importance of circadian rhythms? We as humans are a diurnal species. Light stimulates wakefulness and eating. Dark stimulates sleep and fasting. If we have any type of misalignment between feeding and fasting, day and night, sleep and wake cycles, we disrupt our synchronization of our metabolic processes. And that will contribute to obesity and metabolic disease. TEF, otherwise known as the thermic effect of food, that's the energy that we use to digest our food, is significantly higher in the morning in comparison to the evening. In fact, 2.5 times greater. So let's back up a minute. Let's talk about what are circadian rhythms anyway. They're daily oscillations that are driven by our master clock, which is in our brain, and our peripheral clocks that are in all of our organs and tissues. They are interconnected by regulatory feedback loops. It's a 24-hour long natural rhythm cycle. It regulates both our mind and body processes. So let's talk about what does that mean? Which ones does it regulate? It regulates our body temperature, our blood pressure, our heart rate, our metabolism and energy expenditure, our sleep and wake cycle, our hormonal secretion. So our cortisol, our temperature, and our blood pressure should be highest in the morning. Melatonin will be high, but our temperature and our blood pressure should be lowest in the evening. Regarding circadian rhythms, let's talk about the master clock and our peripheral clocks. Our master clock, remember, is in our brain in a nucleus called the SCN. It is our command center for hunger and satiety, sleep, fluid balance, and stress response. It's most sensitive to light, and it's light within our eyes. So there's a light-sensing protein in the retina called melanopsin, and so the first light of day will reset our master clock. And it's also very sensitive to blue light. So you can understand that our electromagnetic frequencies, so the blue light that comes from our devices and a lot of our lighting in our home, can offset that master clock at all hours of the day if we're exposed too late in the day, and kind of cause that desynchronization and that disruption in the whole circadian rhythm. Our peripheral clocks are found in all of the organs and tissues, such as our liver, heart, kidneys, endocrine glands, gut, muscle, and fat tissue. And these create circadian rhythms through a combination of the SCN, the master clock, and our environment, most predominantly food. So it will help control the timing of digestion, nutrient uptake and metabolism, hormone and metabolite regulation, appetite, and physical activity. So just like the first light of the day will reset the master clock, the first food of the day will reset our peripheral clocks. So let's look at why that matters. One reason is because of our obesity rates. Today, more than 40% of US adults are considered obese. That's 3 times the number as it was in the 1980s. We're eating more than 200 calories a day, and 20% of those are coming from snacks alone. So we're eating at times when we should be sleeping, so we're eating too late in the day, and we don't give our body enough breaks between meals and snacks. So if you remember back to our talk in the carbohydrate module about insulin regulation, every time we eat, we're going to trigger the blood sugar response. We're going to make blood sugar, which is going to trigger the pancreas to make insulin. Insulin's job is to drive that energy or glucose into the cells. However, if we don't need it, we're not going to be using it. So that doesn't give us enough breaks if we're constantly eating our snacks throughout the day. We're getting incorrect advice to eat several small meals throughout the day to boost our metabolism. And a study proved that. In 2017, they looked at people eating 3 or more times a day versus 1 to 2 times a day. And what they found are the folks that were eating 3 or more times a day gained way more weight annually compared to those eating 1 to 2 times a day. So let's talk about intermittent fasting. 12 to 24 hours of fasting is required to deplete 20% or more of our glucose and glycogen. This is going to help switch us over to using fat for fuel through ketosis. The typical pattern for intermittent energy restriction is consuming 500 calories a day for a certain amount of time. Okay, let's look at the different types of intermittent fasting, starting with the 16-8 method. This variation is most common and also known as time-restricted eating. So we're going to talk more in depth about this in just a moment within the same module. So what this includes is fasting every day for 14 to 16 hours and eating within an 8 to 10 hour window during the day. You can drink water and black coffee or tea during your fast. There's also a 5-2 method. This means that you're going to eat normal for 5 days a week, but on those other 2 days, you're going to restrict your calories to 500 to 600 total. It's recommended that women eat 500 and men eat 600. And it's also encouraged that you are doing your lower eating days on non-consecutive days. So give yourself a couple of days of normal eating in between. A 2018 study found effectiveness with weight loss, however, not more so than continuous caloric restriction. There's alternate day fasting method as well. So you're going to eat normally every other day, then on every other day, you're going to fast. And there's a couple variations. You can eat no calories, or you'll have less than 500 calories consumption, or 25% of your normal intake. Now, it's not recommended for beginners. This is more of an advanced technique, and it has been shown to have a lot worse adherence or compliance, which is understandable because that's tough. That's tough to, in a sense, starve your body every other day. It is the most challenging method by far. There was one study that showed that those that were following this method for 6 months had significantly elevated LDL levels at month 12. And that was being off of this type of diet for 6 months. However, HDL cholesterol significantly increased, but weight loss again was not as prevalent. So what are some of the health benefits of fasting in general? This evidence is coming from decades of research with animals and humans. So some of the benefits have been found to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, which we know are the 2 drivers of dysfunction and disease, optimizes energy metabolism, supports cellular protection, and reduces our risk for metabolic disease such as obesity and diabetes, high blood pressure and heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and potentially other inflammatory conditions, cancers, and neurological conditions, because it's increasing a substance called BDNF, brain neurotrophic factor. What are some other health benefits? Insulin will decrease up to 31%. Now, the reason for this is this insulin instigates our burning of fat for fuel to allow for weight loss if it's low. Reduced insulin resistance and risk for type 2 diabetes. Growth hormone increases up to 5-fold, so that instigates fat burning and lean mass gain. Autophagy, this is our cellular debris waste disposal system. So we help to repair our cells by removing cellular waste. And this can protect against cancer and Alzheimer's. gene expression to protect against chronic disease. Weight loss is possible if we don't eat more during those feeding times, whatever method you choose. What they have found in research is that rarely happens. There really was less than 10% increase on the days that we were fasting or not fasting, I should say, when we could eat whatever we wanted. We really didn't go overboard as a general rule. Now, your metabolic rate can increase up to 14% during a short-term fast, so that's another benefit to the types of fasting that we just discussed. What are the adverse effects? So these are more common side effects: irritability, fatigue, hunger, temperature sensitivity, reduced work and athletic performance. Potential risks: if you have any hormone imbalances, this tends to be more common in women over men. It can be tough for them to do certain types of intermittent fasting and fasting in general. It can reduce their glucose tolerance. It can create eating disorders or unhealthy obsessions with food, especially if there's any predisposition or history of disordered eating. You want to take caution with implementing one of these tactics. It increases the stress on the body. So it will affect hormones, the thyroid function, and blood pressure. Skipping meals is going to reduce glucose, which acts as a stressor. So we do produce cortisol in response to any form of stress. So again, that's why we want to make sure that our hormones are regulated and that we're in a healthy place to implement some of these tactics. Sustainability can be difficult. And the safety, we don't quite know the safety long term. And if we're eating junk food or too much on non-fasting days, that's going to affect our long-term health and weight. So what are the risks in regards to what populations should not implement these type of fasting tactics? Pregnancy, lactation, children, those with histories of eating disorders, hypoglycemics or diabetics, and athletes. We need to be very cautious with these types of intermittent fasting tactics. Now, time-restricted eating is a little bit different. This is the safer variation of all of the fasting that we're going to be talking about today. And the variations are 16-8 and 14-10. So what that means is 16-8 is we fast for 16 hours, we eat for 8. The 14-10 is we fast for 14 and we eat for 10. That's the most popular, as we're typically fasting during sleep anyway. Now the options are you can skip breakfast and start eating at 11, so an earlier lunch and then stop by 7, or you skip dinner, and so you start early, about 8, and then you're done by 4. Now you can eat this way as often as you like, or maybe it's just 1 or 2 times a week. So again, if you're not really sure how your body's going to respond, you may want to start with just trialing. Give it an experiment. Do it for a day, see how it feels, and then maybe go to 2 days. And really kind of start by assessing, okay, how long are you fasting? When is the last bite of food for the day? And when's the first bite of food the next day? See how many hours you're fasting, see how many hours you're eating, and just slowly try to widen that fasting window and shortening that eating window. So again, this is one of the safest options for fasting today. So when we're talking about time-restricted eating, there's 2 tough times of day that we want to discuss. One is breakfast, and that's when we have erratic breakfast times. So if we're eating maybe at 7 one morning, we're eating at 9 or 10, or maybe on the weekends not until 12, that can confuse our organs and it can negatively impact their function. So what has been shown is an increased health and weight risk by skipping breakfast. So we don't want to skip breakfast. We do want to have our breakfast, but we want to try to keep it at a consistent time. And then dinner. The later we eat dinner, that can affect our organ function as well as our sleep. So it takes 2 hours to digest, absorb, and utilize nutrients from a meal, and that involves our motility. So slower digestion time is also more prevalent later in the day. So our digestion, remember, thermic effect of food is 2.5 times more effective and strong earlier in the day. So we just don't have that strength in digestion or motility later in the day. And so that can really disrupt our sleep. So especially if you are struggling already with sleep, make sure you give yourself at least 2 to 3 hours from your last meal or food of a day to when you go to bed. Now, there was a study that looked at isocaloric diets with 50% of the calories at breakfast, 14% at dinner, and they found that there was 11 pounds greater weight loss over 12 weeks, and this was in a population of overweight women. It was also associated with improved fasting glucose, insulin, and triglycerides. So that also is something that we're going to be talking about. So eating heavier in the morning, lighter later in the day. And this kind of goes back to that old adage: eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, actually has some validity in regards to aligning with our circadian rhythms. So what is the gist in regards to our digestion and our circadian rhythms? Our saliva production is circadian. We're going to produce up to 10 times more saliva during the day than at night. And that's where we start digestion, is in the mouth with saliva, starting the digestion of our carbohydrates. Stomach acid production is also circadian. It's highest before bed, 8 to 10. So what that means is if we're eating later in the day, we're going to produce a lot more at night versus day after the same meal that is eaten. And that can create a little more reflux. So why people tend to have more acid reflux and heartburn type symptoms if they're eating too late in the day and then they go and lie down. Plus, our small intestine digestion slows at night. So our gut motility, so food that's moving through the digestive system, is fastest during the day, slowest at night. So even thinking about some form of gentle activity, even standing, a slow, gentle walk, maybe taking the dog for a walk, is best after dinner to stimulate your motility. Because remember, naturally, circadian-wise, it's going to be slower after dinner. So what are some tactics? What are some just foundational practices to establish to align your eating with your circadian rhythms, which is more along the lines of our time-restricted eating? If you are working across time zones or you have different work shifts, see if you can adjust that, because any time zone shift can really affect the circadian rhythms and everything we just talked about. So whether you have to travel across time zones or you have to work a shift that misaligns with your natural circadian rhythms and when we should be eating. And adjust your feeding schedule. Try to eat as consistently as you can. Obviously, we can't do the exact same time every day, but within reason. Within an hour's time would be a great goal to strive for, especially for your breakfast and your dinner. Finish dinner by 7 or at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. What are some other things that we can do? With the time-restricted eating, if we start even with a 12-hour fast, knowing that Americans today, 10% of us are eating less than 12 hours, 50% of us are eating greater than 15 hours, so it's the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a 12 to 15-hour fast when in fact we're eating in that amount of time. If we restrict our eating to 10 hours, that really supports driving down inflammation, helps support detoxification, helps our brain health, sleep, and energy. If we restrict that time-restricted eating window to 8 hours during the day, that has been shown to really support our weight loss and fat loss efforts. Now, autophagy, remember, that's our body's garbage disposal. We get rid of the cellular debris. So basically what we're doing is we're recycling those damaged cell parts. We're either removing them from our body or we're using them to build new parts. And that's going to be most active later in the day after we're done eating. The timing of our food. So remember, the first bite of food starts your time-restricted eating window. So just one little bite of food or one sip of a smoothie is going to do that. Even think about your coffee and tea. Now, black coffee, black tea, you're fine. You're not going to break that window or that eating window. But if you add sugar or anything that's got a sweetener in it or cream, anything that has calories, that is going to break your eating window or your fast. So best to eat earlier in the day. Remember your insulin response, your thermic effect of food, so your digestion, your motility, everything is greatest earlier in the day. So make sure that we eat like a king, prince, and pauper. That's a really good premise to strive for. All right, what about the fasting mimicking diet? This is a fasting pattern that restricts calories for a set time period. It was created by an Italian biologist and researcher, Dr. Walter Longo. He is the director of Longevity Institute at the University of Southern California, and he sells a 5-day weight loss program called Prolon. The purpose is to replicate the health benefits of fasting while still eating. It's a 5-day low-calorie diet. It is traditionally higher in fat, lower in calories, and it comes with a pre-packaged food plan. So it is a variation of intermittent fasting. So how it works. So Prolon, or the fasting mimicking diet, is 5 days of pre-packaged meal kits. It's whole food derived, plant-based, provides less than 50% of your normal caloric intake, higher in fat, lower protein, and low to moderate in carb. So it is recommended that you consult with a doctor or dietitian prior to starting this plan. Just make sure your body is ready for something like that, metabolically and hormonally. And this plan was created to follow every 1 to 6 months for optimal results. On day 1, you'll be consuming foods that equal less than 1,100 calories. And that's going to be lower carb, 34%, low protein, 10%, and higher fat, 56%. Now the next 4 days, days 2 through 5, are going to be about 725 calories, which is 47% carb, 9% protein, and 44% fat. So it comes with 5 boxes of food, 1 box per day, with instructions of what to eat at what time. It is vegetarian, gluten, and lactose free. So what kind of foods are included? There's nut bars, there's algae oil, there's soup blends, there's herbal tea, dark chocolate crisp bars, kale crackers, olives, NR1, which is a powdered veggie supplement, and an L drink, which is a glycerol-based energy drink. So you can see there, I gave you a little bit of insight to what some of those foods include. So it really depends on what you need. So when I look at this, I see that if somebody has mast cell disease, they probably don't want to do this, or they're a histamine responder. There's a lot of high histamines in this plan. So it's not going to be for everyone. So again, why you want to make sure that you're checking in with a doctor or a dietitian before you would start a diet like this, just to make sure it's right for you metabolically, hormonally, and food safety wise. So studies have shown benefits of the fasting mimicking diet in humans when they do 3 cycles. So they need to go through it 3 different times. And so that's once a month for 3 months. What they found is improved metabolic markers and risk factors associated with poor health and aging. So they saw weight loss, waist circumference reduction, which included the visceral adipose tissue, systolic blood pressure reduction, and IGF-1, so insulin growth factor 1 reduction, which is a driver of insulin and can be a promoter of cancer cells. The cons to the plan is they're packaged foods at the end of the day, and it's expensive. It's almost $250 for that 5-day kit. The evidence is lacking. Right now there's one official study that's led by the creator. Plus, if you have allergies, so remember I talked about the histamine responders, or if you're allergic to nuts or soy or oats or sesame, it's not going to be the ideal plan for you. So again, it's not going to be the best for everyone. And if you have a history of an eating disorder or disordered eating, there's also a risk there, just like some of the other fasting tactics that we talked about. So what are our practical takeaways from this module? Number 1 is to start with time-restricted eating. If you're interested in the fasting methods where your clients are, this is your safest place to start. And I really encourage looking at what is your current window of eating, what's your current window of fasting, and start to shorten the eating window and widen the fasting window until you are fasting 10 to 16 hours overnight. That's a good place to start. Always strive for nutrient balance through whole-based foods, lots of colorful plants, versus relying on the processed, refined foods during your eating window. And then if you're doing one of the fasting techniques where you have an ad-lib day, you can eat whatever you want because you've gone very low calorie or you've completely fasted on one of the days. Make sure that you stay within the nutritional guidelines that we have been talking about through this certification, because we still want to support health promotion and disease risk reduction. And we're not going to be able to do that if we splurge on the wrong types of foods or we go too high in calories. So don't splurge or binge. Stay whole foods, plant-based, colorful foods, plant-based, lots of healthy fats, lots of healthy clean proteins. So keep it balanced and keep it whole. Make sure your body is ready for one of these intermittent fasting tactics. So that means hormonally and metabolically, you're not under a lot of stress, and that your eating habits are strong. No history of disordered eating. We certainly don't want to throw you into a spiral down where that resurfaces and you have more food issues and connections long term. So with that, this does end our Diet Wars section. So I hope that it gave you a lot more information about a lot of our most common and popular diets out there, including the different fasting methods, but realizing that each and every one of us is biochemically unique, and what works for one may not work for the other. So just making sure that we're partnering with the right professional to help assess and guide and support through the processes to know, is this going to be a good fit for you and for how long, and how do we want to sustain it, or how do we cycle on or off these different plans depending on what it is. So I hope that gives you, again, lots of information about the different types of diets and tactics with fasting, and I'll look forward to seeing you for our next section.